Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Yep.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. How are you?
I am fantastic. A little tired, but it's a beautiful day. Speaking of that, I hope you are okay after the big storm earlier this week.
Yeah, we lucked out this week. The storm last week was pretty harrowing over out in here in the New York City area. But we're covering day by day. We're getting a little bit better, and I think that that's all you can really hope for is that when these types of natural disasters, that your area can kind of bounce back quick.
Yeah, well, I saw some pictures of New York City subways with basically like water like pouring out of the subway itself. Uh, that can't be easy on a city to have to go through. And
No, we we definitely need to work on our infrastructure, just like we got to work on our infrastructure in the cloud. You know what I mean? Like sometimes your infrastructure gets a little leaky, and the only way that you can really have it improved is by having like an investment, and not just by whoever's managing the infrastructure itself, but from the top down. And so I think that's kind of a great parallel. Without having, in DevOps, what we always say is that having a top down approach to change is extremely important. And
yeah.
so I think that that's one of those things you got to look at. It's all kind of cyclical, how we do things with technology, how we do things in the real world and real infrastructure. It's all not that different.
Well, my experience with that, and I had a customer that we talked to them about disaster recovery and being redundant and planning for disasters, and they were telling us that they didn't have the budget for that. It was just too. They're covered. They used to tell us that we're covered. Don't worry about it. We're covered. Until one day they had a flood like that, and bad design on their part. Actually, it was a customer in Quebec City itself, which is basically built on a rock. So they dig a hole into the rock to put the foundation in the building. They put their data center in the basement.
Mm.
So what happens when there's a flood?
Yeah, there's the biggest thing that I can remember is when we had Superstorm Sandy here
Yep.
in the New York City area. I was working in tech, and one of the big things I recall the most is a lot of the big New York City tech companies, sites like Gawker, BuzzFeed,
Yep.
you name it. They were all in this one particular data center over on Water Street, which is right next to the seawall in Lower Manhattan. And their generators were in the basement, and their generator got flooded. Their power went out, and that was that. And so it taught a lot of people. So even like our public housing, we ended up having a lot of buildings that had basement flooding, which is where the generators are. So standards have been changed in the last few years to help improve reliability. And I think that kind of leads us into one of our really cool stories for today about improving reliability. And I'm sure we'll get to that in just a moment. So how's everything else going for you, Pierre?
Oh, everything is great. I'm back. This week was back from vacation. So I spent the first couple of days of the week just trying to unpile myself from an inbox overflowed. Because one thing I did is I basically turned off my notification on my phone. I didn't uninstall the app like a lot of people do, but I basically turned off all the notification and trying to made a point of not turning on my corporate email for the week. So I came back on Tuesday because Monday was Labor Day. And I was like, oh my God, my inbox was overflowing and trying to go through everything. And we're in so many distribution lists and informational and dog food program for this and elite program for that. And so you have to go through hundreds of messages to figure out which one's important, which ones you need to, but got through it. Back in business, back in doing the right thing. So let's go on with the news and your segue from the disaster from Sandy. So
just want to say also, hi, Paul. Thanks for watching. We really appreciate. We're doing great.
Yes, absolutely. So go ahead.
All right, yeah, good. All right, I'll get started. No problem. Hey, when you do these things live, folks. So when I talk about reliability, what I really am talking about also is your reputation as a business.
Yeah.
And so what you want to do when you really think about in your planning stages on how to ensure the most capable application solutions, you want to actually, build high availability. And so this was a great announcement that was from the third. Azure App Service support for availability zones reaches GA. Availability support for public multi-tenant Azure App Service enables you to build high availability into your application architecture. And there are a bunch of really great new docs that are available up on docs.microsoft.com that talk about availability support, or I should say availability zone support improvements. And one of the things that you'll actually see, if you want to scroll down a little, Pierre, is how many different regions are supported with this new app service version 3. So there's a number of different regions that you could put your application that'll give you multiple AZ availability. And so I think that's huge. It'll give people who are not necessarily concerned with just development, but the people who are making sure availability and reliability are part of your solutions are ready. And so having like one region fail, or I should say one AZ fail, means that the other AZs that you have in there are going to stay online, and your application or websites will as well.
Yep. The thing that I love about this is not necessarily about the development side, because I know that's from a developer standpoint, it's not going to change much of how their workflow. However, for the operations side, because when you set up the app service on which your development teams will deploy part of the CI/CD pipeline and all of that good DevOps stuff that you preach all the time, in a good way. Sorry, you set it up with zone availability, and then you don't have to worry about if one compute module goes down or if one network switch goes down. It builds in redundancy into your systems very, very easily, and then makes it so that your redundancy and your resiliency to failures increases tremendously with very little effort.
And if you wanted to actually improve reliability overall, there's of course Azure Front Door, which is like a global scalable entry point for global edge networks to all of your websites. So you could create a front door with multiple regions. So I want to maybe have Australia East, Australia Southeast, and maybe I want to have endpoints here in like New York, or I should say on the East Coast of the US, so US East or East US 2 or something like that. And then I can have front door essentially serve traffic to all three. And then within those individual regions, having availability zone reliability. So we can highly distribute applications, find ways to keep redundancy and have these really, really strong infrastructure architectures.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely what you're saying is dead on in terms of layering your infrastructure. So front door, you can the benefits of front door as well is that it'll give the end user the best possible experience. So if I'm in North America, it's going to direct me to a North American zone. If I'm in Australia, it'll direct me to the closest one to the user. So making your user experience that much better. But that layering that on top of availability zones makes it so much more resilient.
Absolutely. And so that's what we want. And hey, here, Paul says back in the day, we used to use cluster for everything for absolutely everything. And now we add AZ to everything so they can handle it. yeah, that service expanding, I think, is going to be really, really big for people who are concerned with redundancy, reliability, and, like I said, maintaining your business or your application's reputation. And ultimately, we people frequent our apps and our businesses if they're reliable, and that'll only make it so that they keep coming.
That's right. That's right. So speaking of keeping going, well, let's move on to the next item. So this week we have, a new on-demand capacity reservations for Azure Virtual Machines in public preview. This is huge, in my opinion. This is something that our illustrious competitors have had for a long time, but now you can actually reserve instances or capacity for your environment. Because when you look at corporations that have mission critical applications,
Mm-hmm.
and you get to a point where either if it's for a failover, either it's for bursting in terms of capacity, in terms of like if you got like a million people that suddenly come and hit your website, you want to be able to grow. If you're in a region that has some constraint, and we've known some of those constraints over the pandemic, where at some point there were basically the market was growing faster than our data centers, but now you can actually reserve that capacity instead of deploying that capacity and having it either turned off or idle.
Sure. I want to show everybody really quick the big differences. And so here's the on-demand capacity and reserved virtual machine instances. The big differences: on-demand capacity, virtual machines. The term, I think, is huge. No commitment required. Yep. Capacity is reserved and backed by SLAs. There's no discounts here. It's pay as you go. But still, I think the benefits, when you consider the fact that it's burstable, it's general purpose, you can also really concern yourself with disaster recovery. So if you've got a DR situation that you need to always have capacity available for,
yep,
that you can go ahead and have on demand as you need it. And then also the special events. So let's say, you're planning a huge promotion, you're expecting a huge influx of traffic, and that requires, say, maybe 15, 20 more VMs. Well, there's an app for that, inside of, and we can handle we can handle these this expansion by giving you this on-demand capacity. So I think this is really great for people who, same as we just talked about before. Reliability, redundancy, and the ability to have a reputation that's maintained because people are able to get to what you're providing to them.
Yep. And we still know that this is more for the IaaS type deployment, so it's not so much like the app service that we were talking about earlier. But that's still a huge portion of our customers that are leveraging IaaS to deploy those types of systems. So great. Moving on to our next item, Jay. What's going on?
So the next thing is we need you to upgrade to the latest version of Azure AD Connect before August 31 of 2022. So you've got a year or a little bit less than a year if you want to avoid service disruptions when using this. It's really important. So before August 31st, make sure if you have some 1X versions of AAD Connect, get it upgraded to the latest version. I know that Windows, and we'll talk about in a little bit, there's all these improvements to Windows that are going to be coming out soon. And based on that, you're going to want to make sure that you are, quote unquote, ready for it. And so if a new version doesn't necessarily to add a machine into an AD environment, it isn't up to, or I should say, doesn't use those older versions of these protocols, what's the point? why upgrade? So making sure that you're ready, you're prepared, that's a huge part of operations.
Yeah, well, this one is very important, and we're giving them a year. Like, I remember in the days of when 2008 went out of support, we've been telling them for like 2-3 years in advance that it was coming, it was coming, it was coming. And then when we cut support, everybody went, "Oh my God, why didn't you tell us?" So that's what we're doing again. We're telling you to update your AZ Connect. And the reason that we're doing that ahead of time is because the AZ Connect has components in it that are from SQL Server 2012.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's some runtimes and some SQL 2012 components that are no longer going to be supported and maintained. So that everything that's like a 1.x version of AD Connect needs to be upgraded so that you have the upgraded or the supported portion of SQLs that are built into that product product. Blech.
It's one of the reasons I actually like Azure SQL so much, is that as these kind of changes happen, you don't need to be as concerned. If you're maintaining your own SQL servers locally, or I should say in a IaaS situation, there's a lot of this type of overhead that you need to concern yourself. The other thing I love about Azure SQL is the versionless aspect to it. And so that, we maintain a non-version, but with just a feature-driven version of SQL. And I think reducing how much overhead you have, especially with managing your AD, I think thinking in this way, I love services over VMs. While VMs have their place, I still prefer services. And I think that that also gives you an opportunity, if you have old SQL servers that are using this Connect, considering moving them into a platform as a service or a database as a service, as opposed to infrastructure as a service.
Yeah, well, infrastructure versus and IaaS versus PaaS. I completely agree with you. I prefer a PaaS service because then I don't have to worry about the patching. I don't have to worry about
Mm-hmm.
the underlying OS. I don't have to worry about anything like that. I just have to set it up, maintain it, make sure that the backups are taken, make sure that the security is set, that the data is secure and protected, and that the users have the access they want. But I don't have to worry about all the nuts and bolts that are underneath it. But for a lot of our customers that are supporting legacy systems, and I use the term legacy very, very lightly because it doesn't have to be like software that's 10, 15 years old. It might be something that was built a little while ago, but it's supporting or it's built on an IaaS platform. And we all know how long sometimes that the development, especially in the corporate world, development of a new corporate tool can take. So if it's on IaaS, then run it on IaaS, and you have the choice and you have the capacity to do both. But if you can go to PaaS, especially with some of the enhancement, and we talked about that last week with private endpoints for PaaS services. It does make more sense to slowly start embracing those cloud native technologies.
Yeah, and there's also ways to kind of still have some of that underlying control you have, but still be in more of a PaaS situation, like with, say, Azure SQL Managed Instance. You know what I mean? Like, I think that that's a good kind of in between of having some sort of management that's handled by the provider, but still giving you the ability, like if you have certain types of like stored procedures and things like that, you still can manage those pretty easily.
Yeah, but there are some requirements that you have to look at your application and what you're using, because some
Mm-hmm.
stuff doesn't actually work exactly the same in PaaS versus IaaS, especially for something like SQL. But there is a definite benefits. But you have to know your application and you have to plan properly.
Okay.
All right. Next item is, let me switch here. Windows Server is 2022 is now generally available, and this came last week.
Okay.
But for some reason, we didn't make our cutoff for our show last week, but we are talking about it this week. So Windows 2022 is generally available, and there is a Windows Service Summit that is coming up very shortly. I believe it's on the 16th. So go register if you have not registered already. Where you can actually do a deep dive on all of the capabilities. Yeah, September 16th. Capabilities of Windows 2022 with all of the added features, added functionality for new hybrid type of workloads, better security, and what's the other thing? I'm having a brain fart here. New support for stuff like Kubernetes on Windows Server.
Mm-hmm. And so that leads you into the other big announcement that came. I believe Windows 2022 is now Windows Server 2022 is now GA.
Yep.
All right. Well, really cool. Like I said, there's a ton of new features like advanced multi-layered security, hybrid capabilities with Azure, which I think is huge. A flexible application platform that you could take advantage of scalability, like support for up to 48 terabytes of memory, which, geez, and 2048 logical cores running on 64 physical sockets. So if you need very, very high-end compute, Windows 2022 or Windows Server 2022 is definitely going to be useful for you. And there's container support. So some of the capabilities of Azure Kubernetes Service and AKS Stack, HCI, they're all available for you. So I think that's real big.
Yeah, it really is the best version of Windows to run in a hybrid environment. It gives you all of the stuff that you are used to and you love for on-prem, but it does have the connection to Azure so that you can use some of the Azure services to make your on-prem life a little easier and better. So I do believe that this is going to be the best version for you to use if you are in a hybrid situation, especially if you're running workloads, as you mentioned, like Kubernetes and containers and stuff like that. It's a great way of simplifying your life by having one OS in all of your environment.
And there's a great way to kind of start taking a look at this. You can use Windows Server on Azure for free. So if you go, and I'll share this website over here with y'all in the chat for the evaluate service evaluate. So I think if you want to check this particular service out, let me bring it up here. Yep, there we go. You can evaluate Windows Server 2022 using either Azure. You can create a Windows Server VM. You can download the ISO. You can download the VHD. I think that gives you just all these different options where you don't have to make a huge commitment right away. You can just give it that quick look and see if it's right for you. And hopefully it is. You've also got a version that I think is huge, the server core version. And the server core version gives you a headless deployment. We all don't need to interface with a GUI sometimes. Sometimes we just want to run some PowerShell commands.
Well, you can, because the way it's built now with the Windows admin console, if you deploy all of your servers with core, so no GUIs on all of them, but you have the GUI installed on your Windows 10 or Windows 11 machine, or maybe a jump box where you've got all of your management applications. So if you want the GUI, you can do it remotely. And if you want the command line, then it's there as well. So you really get the best of both worlds without having to lock down some processes and memory utilization for a GUI that's not being used on a server.
And so you can try a Windows Server on Azure if you'd like to. I think it's a really great way to kind of get those evaluations. Here is a link to it in case you need it. I think, sorry about that.
No worries.
You can use Windows Server on Azure, not in Azure. Pardon me, I typed that too fast. You can get that evaluation. Azure, Microsoft.com, campaigns, Windows Server. Take a look right away. You can go ahead and discover the trusted cloud for Windows Server on Azure.
Absolutely. Well, we're almost out of time, so we've got 2 more segments to our show. And the first one was a suggestion from you, so I'm going to let you drive that one. And I actually went through it last night, and I really appreciate it. I really did. So take us there.
Sure. So one of the big things that we want to be able to do, and if you want to just bring up the module, great. Microsoft Learn is an amazing place to start getting education for different subjects. And a lot of it is, driven by Microsoft technologies, whether it's working on Windows or learning containers or managing and securing Azure. But this particular learning path, I think, is very, very special because it leads people to being able to do a little bit more with their career. So now they're not just skilling up the ideas of the technology, but this learning path, which is start in tech as an intern, really gives you a kind of a guide on how you as the beginner or you maybe the career transitioner that works as an intern somewhere. So there are great modules on how to get noticed. So networking, not even computer networking, but human networking, resume building, a module with 9 units about successful interviewing. And then there's this idea about how to go from that intern to a full-time position. So how do you negotiate that? How do you, find out if this is the right job for you long-term? Maybe you just want to take that experience and continue on your path somewhere. Regardless, having a roadmap, I think, makes us feel a little bit more comfortable when we're taking these journeys. And so what we're doing was we're trying to enable everyone. I think that goes to our company's mission statement. What is it? To enable everyone.
To empower.
And that's, I guess, another big part of it is you're empowering people. You're telling them you can take control of how your career looks by using tools that people who have had this, journey find to be really useful.
Well, it's really useful. It's targeted for people that are just coming into the industry. I'm like, okay, I'll give them that. However, having gone through it last night, there are some stuff that's, especially in the interview part, because none of us are. Well, some of us are not really great at interviewing because you get the anxiety going, you get the fear, and you start doubting yourself because nobody likes to be in that situation. Some actually people thrive on it, other people kind of like shy away from it. But it had some good tips and some good things to keep top of mind when you're going through an interview. I haven't had to write a resume in 18 years. Hopefully I won't have to again, but also had some good tips on that.
Yeah. Useful, extremely useful content, huge subject, very, very helpful. And I think that, people are going to thrive. They're going to thrive because like I was about to say, at Microsoft, our mission is to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. And things like this are going to help you achieve more.
Yep. All right. So our community and other shows coming up, you have a weekly show, don't you?
Yep. Azure Fun Bites, Learn TV. Every week from 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, you can check out all these different versions or different updates that we have on the blog post. You can go to aka.ms/learntv, or you can go to dev.to/jaydestro, JAYDESTRO, same as my Twitter handle, and you can see I've got all the archives of just all 56 shows. And this past week, we did a great show with Christos Matskas. We talked about identity services and managed identities and secretless application development. I thought it was really interesting.
Great. And later today, we have testing in production with Jared Shockley, J-Shock, and myself, Steve, the audio guy, as he calls himself, which is, I think, right now, he's in New York, but he's driving back to the West Coast in his new RV. I think he just picked up an RV in the New York City area, and he's taking the scenic route back to the West Coast, and I think he's going to be broadcasting from the RV, so I'm not quite sure about that. Quick note about testing in production later today. We are on YouTube only today, and that's something that I know that the protest for hate raids that has happened in Twitch was a couple weeks ago. But this is our first episode since, so Jared and I decided we're going to skip Twitch today, and we're going to be strictly on YouTube for today's episode.
I know that's, you want to keep everything in a good environment for people. So, that's a big part of it.
There's no place for hate anywhere.
Absolutely. I can't disagree with that statement. That's very, very true.
All right. Well, we are a little out of time, but no worries. So thank you very much, Jay, for joining us again this week for another episode of AzUpdate. As you mentioned, you can find all of the information on aka.ms/AzUpdate. All of the links and information that we talked about today are going to be there in that article. Again, Jay, thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me again.
All right. And for all of you watching us, thank you for joining us. Thank you for participating in the chat, and we will see you next week.